From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, I'm Rob Cairns. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief creator of Amazing Ideas at Stunning Digital Marketing. In today's podcast, I sit down with my friend James Giroux, a fellow Canadian, and we talk about Team WP and all things WordPress. Grab a drink, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. This podcast is brought to you by Stunning Digital Marketing, the digital marketing agency for all your business needs. We are also your WordPress security experts, having over 14 years of experience locking down, backing up, and protecting WordPress websites. Go to stunningdigitalmarketing.com for more info, or stunningdigitalmarketing.info for links to everywhere we can be found on the web. Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. And today I'm here with my guest, James Giroux. How are you today, James?
I'm doing great. How are you, Rob?
Doing good. It's always good to get a fellow Canadian on this show. We need to dominate the world. Like, you're like 2 hours away from me, give or take 2.5, in the fine
That's
town
it.
of Kingston, Ontario, aren't you?
Hey.
Yeah, the biggest joke with Kingston used to be it was all students and jailbirds at one time, because those who don't know Kingston, there's several prisons, including the famous one down on the waterfront, which is now closed for a number of years, right? The main
That's right. It's a
Kingston
museum now.
Yeah. I've actually been in it. I was in it before COVID hit, and it's quite the place to do a tour of. So it's quite interesting, and so much part of Kingston's history. So we were going to talk a little bit about Team WP, some projects you're working on, all kinds of wonderful stuff. But before we get to that, how'd you get into WordPress and why?
Oh, WordPress.
That word.
WordPress. It's such a part of who I am that it's hard to even remember the first few projects. But I guess probably I was working in, for those of you who don't know, Ontario is a big province in Canada. So it's about 18, 20 hours to drive from one side to the other. So I was working in Thunder Bay, Ontario, Canada. So if you think I'm on the east side now, it's far west. And it was, I was building a website for a youth group or a church I was working at, and I needed something to just make it easy, because I had done the whole HTML, CSS thing. I was like, ain't nobody got time for that, right? Like I got lots of stuff to do, and I don't want to be worrying about this. So I built my first website. And I mean, that's really, I think everyone's journey is, I needed something quick, I need something easy, I need something cheap to get going. And WordPress at the time had this really cool thing. It was this free theme directory. So you could actually go and not just use the default theme, but you could actually go and you could find designs. So rather than having it look like a blog, you could get like a news looking site or a magazine layout for your website. And that was how I got hooked into it. And from there, I just kept using it in all of my things. I ended up going to school for design. And came out of that and had WordPress as like that foundational piece in my toolkit. Went full time in 2012 as a freelancer, built that into an agency, started working for PageLines, which was a drag and drop builder at the time, one of the first in the space. And then from there, ended up at Envato. From Envato, I jumped to Rocket Genius, the makers of Gravity Forms. And my last stint before what I'm doing now was at Stellar WP, part of the Liquid Web family of brands.
So they've kind of been all over the place.
I've been
Yeah.
all over. I like to I've sort of think of like the four bases of WordPress. I've done the theme and plugin shop, I've done the marketplace, I've done the hosting company. The only one left is Automatic.
Yeah.
And then I'll
It's
have
so
hit the home run.
And it's funny you mentioned Thunder Bay. We were talking before we went to record about a friend of mine who was a teacher. And guess where she's from? Thunder Bay, Ontario. So there
There
you
you
go.
go.
I've been up there. It's beautiful up there. It's a wonderful place to visit. I mean, if you're ever up there, you got to go see like the Sleeping Giant. It's like, one of those wonders of the North. And people don't realize this province is big. It's like 16 out. That's a 16-hour drive from Toronto, believe it or
Yeah,
not.
it's huge.
It's huge.
Huge.
So yeah, that's interesting story. Yeah, and there's a lot going on in this space. Like you've been at places like Envato, and there's changes going on there. I was reading an article yesterday or the day before that Aveda, who's the number one theme selling in ThemeForce, which is part of that marketplace, right? They have now pulled out and they're selling through their own website, interestingly enough. So
Really?
yeah, and they are the only theme ever to sell over $1 million. Yep. Isn't that interesting? So there's all kinds of changes going on even in that space. So it's just really interesting to see how some of this has come full circle. I mean, Gravity Forms, when Gravity Forms came out, they were the only really good forms product. And now there's a multitude of real good ones. And I'm not criticizing Gravity. I think I told you I'm a WS Forms user to no end, but that's choice. And there's a lot of good solutions out there right now, and the marketplace has matured, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's much different today than it was when we all first got going 15 years ago. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
that's about my timing. It was about 16 years ago or so. Yeah, so it's about the same. It's interesting. So you've created this company called Team WP. What are you doing with it? And do you want to tell us a little bit about what's going on there and the action going on?
Yeah, I mean, Team WP. It's weird to say I've started a company because, as a freelancer, as an agency, the company's always been there. It's just a new outlet. I have been, as you say, around the ecosystem. I've worked in small teams, I've worked in large teams, I've been a one-man shop. I've had a team of 5 working for me. I've, worked with hundreds of people across multiple teams, and I have seen the good. I like to say I've seen the good, the great, and the not so great when it comes to how teams work together, how leadership happens. And I I've always had this passion for like leadership and culture and team. I haven't always been able to articulate it the way that I've wanted to. I've been a student of leadership for as long as I can remember. Um, Even in middle school, I was in, this is gonna sound funny, but I was in like a pilot program where they actually taught an entire course on leadership as part of the middle school curriculum. And that's really where I first got this view of leadership, that it was something that could be learned, right? And it's something you studied, right? This art of leadership. And second, that it was something that was not necessarily like, even if you were a natural leader, it was something you had to practice. It was something you had to work through and hone. Um,
Yeah.
and all of that, and all of my time in WordPress, and seeing, as I said, the good, the great, and not so great, has led me to perspectives, experiences, and perspectives on what I think works in leadership, what I think works in team and people, and culture. And I started writing about it last year a bit more proactively after WordCamp Europe in, where was it last year? Uh, where were we last
Was
year,
that
Rob? Do you
was
remember?
that Porto? Was that Porto?
Porto, yes, in
Yeah.
Porto. It
Our
was actually,
mutual friend Bob Dunn moved to Porto
yes,
after
exactly.
because he loved it so.
Um, it was a conversation with Rich Tabor there where I had been, like I've been trying to figure out for many years, like I'm not a developer necessarily, right? Like I'm not going to be that guy or that person that goes out and creates a plugin feature from scratch to do something. Like, that's
Yeah.
just not my wheelhouse. but I wanted to contribute something to WordPress. I wanted to be part of moving it forward, whatever that looked like. As I started to reflect on some of the challenges that I was having in, or seeing, in these roles and in these cultures, and some of the commonalities of challenge that I was
Yeah.
seeing as I was going from place to place, it it got me thinking, I wonder if there's like an opportunity here for me to now bring my experience, bring the education that I've had, and the the learnings into the WordPress ecosystem in a different way. Because the reality is we just don't have teams very much, or a lot of teams that have the capacity to have a dedicated, team and people ops kind of person, or a team and culture person. Um, and so, like, yeah, so Team WP came out of that. I was blogging that was getting some traction. People were resonating with what I was saying. So I said, well, why don't I see if there's something here that I can turn into something? So my original thought back when I kicked this off, I was on a holiday in Mexico, first holiday we'd had since
On a
COVID,
beach. On a beach.
on a
Yeah.
beach, on a beach in Mexico, drinking my mojito. And I said to my wife, I said, I want to build something like this. I want to take these ideas, these leanings and promptings around team and culture, and I want to turn it into something that I can give back to WordPress.
Yeah.
Is there something here that I can open source? Is there something here that I can do open? And so that's really where Team WP came from, and the idea of the Team Experience Index, our industry benchmark survey, came from. And so December came up with the idea and spent some weekends working it out. And then I launched the pre-beta, really, because I had nothing but a web page and a concept that I launched
Yeah.
at WordCamp Asia. And then I came back from WordCamp Asia and found out my role was being made redundant. And now I had all this free time to
Mm.
to do things. So I was like, all right, well, I'll keep hunting for that future role, but what if I can create the role of my dreams out of Team WP as well?
Yeah.
So you can't be, filling in job applications 8 hours a day. So this is what I do in my in my downtime.
Yeah. It's interesting. You said something, give back to WordPress. And I
Yeah.
think our community is the culture where many of us, and I don't care who it is, whether they work for Automatic or don't, we're all trying to give something back, whether it's
Mm,
giving back from a leadership perspective, or running. In a case, what I do, I help co-manage a large LinkedIn group to give back to the,
mm,
that's why I do it, to give back to the community, or to get involved in those million one discussions about where we should go, because we all care. And this community is like no other community. I mean, I've heard Rich Tabor say it, I've heard Brian Gardner say it, I've
mm.
heard Michelle Frechette say it, amongst many other people. It's like no other community out there. It's kind of special the way we manage our community, isn't it?
The fact that you can say those names and I know exactly who you're talking about,
Yeah.
I mean, that says something right there,
Yep.
right? Like, our community is just so great at supporting each other, helping each
Yep.
other out.
And not only that, these people, like the Brians and the Riches, who I look up to and say, as
Mm,
developers, you guys have done it all. I
mm,
mean, Brian was the founder of Studio Press, as many
mm,
people know, back in the day. And now his big project, besides being on the WP Engine team, is Frost, for
mm,
example. And I can go to a guy like Brian and say, hey, Brian, can I get 20 minutes of your time? Can we do an interview? Can we have a chat? Can I get some help? I'm stuck.
mm.
And what Brian will do is he'll fire you back a calendar link and say, hey, find some time. I'd love to help you. Rich Tabor's
That's
the
great.
same. Diego's the
Yeah.
same. I mean, we have a real, and these are just three. I was on a call with Marcus Burnett, who you know well,
Mm,
over at GoDaddy the other day. And Marcus and I were talking about some WooCommerce stuff. I have a client who was looking at the one of the GoDaddy WooCommerce solutions, by the way, which they've gone to. And Marcus is like, if you need 20 minutes, we'll find it. And by the way,
yeah.
if you need help, skip the support line and contact me. like, isn't this community special? Like,
That's
really?
great. Yeah. I mean, that's it. I mean, I've been blown away even just
Mm,
putting this all out there. Like when I first launched my business a number of years ago, like even in the PageLines ecosystem,
yep.
launching some themes and plugins there, it was like always this like uncertainty and putting it out there. Will people buy it? Will people do things? Like will it resonate? And fighting for any little bit of traction I could get in that little ecosystem before WordPress was really organized. Now, this is the first real thing I've launched into WordPress that I'm putting my own name and reputation
Yeah.
behind, and to see the community like come out of the woodwork to support it, and to support me, but not just me, but like the idea, right?
Yeah.
What we're about, what I'm trying to do. It's 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 something that can only happen in WordPress.
Yeah. But that also, James, is because of who you are too. And I mean that. Like
Mm.
I kind of look at it and say, I've been doing this podcast thing. And when I started it 3.5 years ago because I was tired of blogging. I really was
Yeah.
for myself. I do it for clients. And by the way, ChatGPT does it for clients, but we won't go there. And I got tired of writing for myself, and I said, you know what? I know guys in the blogging space, guys like Bob Dunn, guys like Nathan Wrigley, guys like Matt Medeiros, all big podcasters, guys like Danny Brown. I've known Danny for years. And I said, I need to jump into this space. And I had a lot of conversations, and one of the persons I had conversations who's not really in the WordPress space, but in the marketing space, is a tech journalist in Canada by name of Amber MacArthur, if you know Amber. And we had some conversations, and Amber said to me, hey, you should do it. You should try it. I did 10 episodes. I did 20. I did 30. I did 100. I did 200. As the time is recorded, I've published 329 episodes as of this morning. So
Wow.
you kind of look at it. And a lot of that is the community support behind it. I mean, I can go to many people up at Automatic and say, hey, do you have time to jump on a 20-minute call? I've had one of my favorite guests up at Automatic is a hardcore dev, the Gutenberg lead, Matthias Ventura. I've had Matthias on several times. And
He's great.
Yeah, he's wonderful. But you need to speak a little dev speak.
He came out to an event I was hosting last year at WordCamp Europe, and he is so thoughtful.
Yes.
And how he approaches you is like, I mean, like I was sitting across from him, and you wouldn't know he's like the Gutenberg lead, right?
No.
Because he doesn't have any air to him that of anything. He's just this really humble guy, but really, really smart, really, really good at just asking those probing questions and providing that next level of insight for you that you're like, oh, I wish I thought of that, or that's a really great way to phrase that, or to look at that. Sorry,
No, it's okay. I'm glad you're going there, because I was going to add, the first time I interviewed Matthias, it was funny. I had him and Birgit Polly Hack on at Gutenberg Times, and we all know Birgit in this community. And I had just moved to Gutenberg in the box from a traditional page builder. So we did like a coffee style chat where we broke down what I did and how I did it, and what I would suggest that people did and what people shouldn't do. The one thing people shouldn't do is don't do it on a live site. It's a really painful process. And it's just, and it was just, it was along that lines. It was just this amazing chat that I got off of. And I thought, after we were on for over an hour, and I thought, wow, like, where did that go? And we are lucky in this community. Like, it's truly what keeps me doing what I do, and probably what keeps you doing what you do, I think.
Definitely it is.
Yeah. So where do you think Team WP is going to go? Where would you like it to go?
Well, like every good entrepreneur, my goal is to take over the world. That's what entrepreneurs do.
That's right.
Um, but really, so like, I've been thinking about this the last because people are starting to ask, and it's the question. So, what is Team WP? Is always a question they ask. How are you going to make money out of this? Like, what is this thing? Um,
Mhm.
so I want to paint a picture for you because I think that that's really helpful, maybe for all of us. Just take a quick look at the landscape. Um, WordPress. What makes WordPress so amazing is that anyone, regardless of their background, regardless of what they have or have done, can look at a problem and through code try to solve that in
Mhm.
WordPress. They can distribute that freely. They can even
Yeah.
sell it and make a living off of it.
And if they don't
Those
like
that
it,
are, huh?
and they can fork it too.
And fork it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you've got this distributed landscape, or this distributed world where people are able to do that, and so you have these ones and twos that turn into fives and tens and thirties and whatever all over the world, and because of that, you don't have these concentrations of people to be able to think through things like culture and team and what it takes to run a company. We're really good at building products. We're not so
Mhm.
great at building companies.
That's true.
And that's not a knock on WordPress. That's just a function of reality. We have got developers, brilliant designers, brilliant product people that have just solved the right problem at the right time. They've ended up with 5 support team, 5 people on their support team, 10 people on their development team, 3 in their marketing team, and then like 2 or 3 ops plus their senior leadership. Like it just explodes like that.
Mhm.
And but what often happens is those team cultures get centered around doing the work, right? And it
Yep.
becomes about what you do, not how you do it. So we've got
Mhm.
limited focus on team development. We don't have capacity. Like it's hard for any team of 15, 20, 30 to justify a full-time or a dedicated, like people and culture
Yep.
person or team. Um, on top of that, we don't understand career progression and professional development in WordPress. Like oftentimes in WordPress, you land in a role and what you're just expected to do that role forever,
It's
right?
so true. And I
Because we
just
don't
want to,
have we don't have
yeah,
any way of helping people move forward. I mean,
yeah,
those are just some things, right? We've got team misalignment, ineffective collaboration. We get mad at each other easily. We don't know how to talk to each other. We have a hard time attracting and retaining top talent because of the WordPress penalty, right? Like
yeah.
the the compensation cost. We're 25 to 30% underpaid compared to colleagues in other parts of the ecosystem of the tech landscape. So
Mhm.
how do we actually compete there? Why do people choose WordPress? They choose
Yeah.
WordPress because of culture, because of
Yep.
community, because of what
I
we
agree.
offer in that way. So if
I
we're
agree.
not proactively taking steps to make that better, then we're going to lose that talent. We're going to lose those great people that we all know and love to other
Mhm.
places and spaces. So that's
Mhm.
why I think Team WP is important. And where we're going with it, we want to help. Like I was telling you earlier, I had this aha moment that what Team WP really like ultimately I think it is. It's about, I mean, the mission, the vision is about creating open people first workplaces in
Yep.
WordPress,
Yep.
which is great marketing words, and I've got lots of thinking behind it. But I mean, it's just about giving leaders permission
Mm.
to be the leaders they've always wanted to be.
Yep. I agree. There's a couple things you touched on in there, and we wanted to get to. You were talking about professional development.
Mm,
And I think the biggest problem with people in our ecosystem, they're freelancers and agency owners, they're always chasing the next best thing
mm,
instead of honing their skills and making them better. And
yeah,
I know from listening to Brian a lot, Gardner again, he says what people need to do is take 10 to 15% of their time, invest it back in themselves, which I
yeah,
agree with. I mean, I'm an avid reader, I'm an avid tinkerer. Um, you've heard me say, I think I've said to you, but I certainly said on this show, I read a book a week. That's
mm,
a professional book. So that's either a marketing or a WordPress centric book to try and keep my skills up. It's something I do regularly. That's the first thing. The other thing we need to do, and I think is our biggest problem, is the culture of WordPress is amazing, but we need to stop selling WordPress as the solution. And I really believe that. So where I'm kind of going is what we should be selling is a content management system that's easy for a client to update on their own, that kind of stuff. The only place I think WordPress should be sold as a solution is if you're in a business like I am, where I do security services. Obviously, that's WordPress centric, so you can't get around it. But for clients, sell the clients what they're getting. You're getting a website that's easy to update. You can make updates, your text updates yourself. You don't need to go to a dev. It's good for SEO. It's good to drive traffic, which will drive sales. Those are the things clients care about. The average client doesn't care that it's WordPress under the hood. What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't disagree. As a marketer, I can tell you, you sell the outcome. You don't sell the process.
Yep.
So, WordPress is the process by which most companies get to the outcome they're after, whether that's more customers, right, or more leads, or whatever, more donations. I mean, in the end, it usually comes down to money, right? More money. But we sell the outcome, and WordPress is the process. But for those of us that are in that process piece, that's where I think there's opportunity, because even when you look at an agency, or you look at who's selling that, they have to not just sell the outcome, they have to sell the team that's going to deliver the outcome, right? And when you are a single freelancer, that's a safe bet. Chances are you're going to be there from the beginning to the end of the project. When you're an agency that's growing, you've got 5, 10, 15, 20 people, and you've got multiple projects, and you've always got new start dates and new stop dates and new things going on. You've got that pressure. That intensity of work can be something that can either support your team, or it can detract from your team and burn them out, right? And one of the things that you'll see, whether that's through the Team Experience Index results that I've been working on, or even just other surveys, is that 25 to 30% is your average turnover per year in any agency, right? Because the pressure is there. Can you imagine? I just want to throw this out there. If you're a client, you're working on a project, and you're told that 1/3 or 1/4 of the people that are assigned to work on your project aren't going to be there by the time it finishes. And at some point in that process, or multiple times in that process, you're going to have to get everyone around the table. You're going to have to remind them what the project scope is, retrain, or wait for them to be brought up to speed, right? All those delays, all those risks, all those lost times or whatever, like that all adds up, and that becomes a risk factor for a client, right? Especially a larger client with larger projects with multiple touch points, trying to decide on which kind of agency they're going to go for, right? And if we don't have teams that are proactively investing that 10 to 15%, like you mentioned, back into themselves, back into their team and culture, right? And you've got to make a choice. You're going to pick the team that's clearly focused on making sure their team is well served, because a well served team is going to deliver better.
No, I agree with that. As you were saying that, I was thinking way back to about 1990, and I haven't shared this with you, but I started my venture into the tech space as an old style COBOL programmer. There's a word you don't hear very much anymore.
COBOL.
And I was working for Allstate Life Insurance of Canada. So they were a subsidiary of Allstate US at the time. And they were working on a project to bring the life insurance system that drove all the sales, all the CRM, everything for the Canadian, to break it away from the US giant in Chicago. And we had a team that had a turnover rate of 300% in a year and a half I was there.
Whoa.
Yeah. And that focused, I hate to say it, back to the big L word called leadership. And we were talking about this before we went to record, you and I, about how leadership is so important and how it's a skill that's not just acquired, it's learned. And
Mm,
the percentage was that high. And part of the problem on that project was nobody was investing time back into their own careers. They were just like code monkeys, and they were
mm,
just pounding away. And they had an old school manager who didn't believe in investing, and
mm.
that's the way it went. And to be honest, people involved in projects need to learn something. They need to be challenged, and they need to get time to invest back into themselves, because those are the best employees, not the ones that you turn around and say, go do this project for 10 hours. That doesn't work, right? Anymore.
I couldn't ask for a better segue into one of the first things that we've done at Team WP, which is actually try to create a framework for leadership. I
Yeah.
never thought I would be that person to go out and go, here are my, 8 steps to being a leader. Like John Maxwell has his 5 levels of leadership, and then you've
Yep.
got good, great, and sort of the cog that Jim Collins produced, and all these other people. I was like, no, I have enough experience now and enough understanding of the WordPress ecosystem to do it. I used to have what I called a radical tacos, and radical tacos was tacos was an acronym, obviously, for a transparency, accountability, no, transparency, authenticity, candor, ownership, and signals. Those were like my 5 leadership principles that I had for myself personally. And
Yep.
you talk about that. It's morphed into what I call the open team framework, and it's 8 principles, but one of the 8 is continuous learning. And it's
Yes.
exactly what you talked about there, which is that, and it's two-sided, right? Because it's not just about professional development, it's about an attitude we take to the work that we do. So you think
Mhm.
about how we approach problem solving, how we approach project delivery, especially like you think of marketing in particular, which is a very results driven area of any business. If you run a campaign and that campaign does not achieve the results that you were expecting, what's the first thing you feel most of the time,
Let
right?
down. Yeah.
Let down.
Yeah.
Fear is
Yeah.
usually a second thing, because what happens if you've had a campaign that you've put time, money, effort into that doesn't deliver the results, right? You've got
Yeah.
to hold the bag on that, right? That sense of fear that you're going to be held responsible or be accountable for it and lose your job, right? So this
You might
idea of
even feel you might even feel worthless inside sometimes.
absolutely, right? Like
You
I
know.
can't do this. Like why didn't it work? Continuous learning, it's part of that is that professional development of always reading, always getting better, but it's that curiosity in the way we approach projects, the way we approach campaigns, the way we approach our work as well, to say, hey, failure is only failure if we fail to learn, right?
Yes. Yep.
So rather than doing that, let's actually take this thing that didn't give us the results that we were expecting. Let's unpack that. Let's see what
Mhm.
can we learn from that. Oh, well, we started the campaign on a Thursday when normally we start them on a Tuesday. So the momentum that we would normally get from the week, we lost because we had a weekend in the middle. Okay, there's a key learning. Let's not do that next time. Right?
And then
We
maybe
can,
we should have run it for 2 weeks instead of 1 week to give the
yeah,
campaign traction time, or
yeah.
maybe the timing of the year was better, or maybe the events going on in the world that impacted our campaign. Right? That
Think
happens.
about how different
Yeah.
your culture becomes, your team environment becomes when you're bringing learning to the table as opposed to bringing defeat or fear, right? Or, accusations about who did what and who didn't do this, right? Like, oh my goodness, it totally, I mean, building trust, building rapport, building new
Mm.
opportunities, and a willingness to take risks and be innovative in ways that maybe you wouldn't otherwise be willing to do. Anyway, sorry,
Yeah.
you got me on a tangent talking about
It's
that kind of
okay,
stuff.
because
But
I'm gonna go on this tangent one more, because I'm not done here. This is a great conversation, so don't be sorry. And this is why the problem I have with today's society, so here goes my tangent, is
oh, here we go.
we can't have a cancel history society, because if we cancel everything in the past, how do we learn to move forward into the future? How do we do that? We can't. We have to recognize what we've done wrong in the past and make it better. And then we can move forward.
I think one of the things we have to be careful of in that, I'm not, and I hear your point, but I want to just reflect a little bit back as well,
Sure.
is that part of the challenge that we have is that what is um, history maybe for us is still raw, real, and present for others.
Yes.
And the lived experience that we have is very different. And if we are celebrating somebody or venerating somebody, or
Mhm.
creating statues for people and ways of working that we think because of our lived experience, our history, but are still the present and the very real experience of others, I don't think that that's right either. And finding that balance of learning,
Yeah.
right? I think is important. So I totally agree. We have to learn from our past.
And we have to
But
be
what's
a
our
little bit
past is still somebody's present.
and we have to be a little bit more open-minded and more accepting of other people's viewpoints. And
Absolutely.
that's one of my biggest, we were talking before we went to record, my biggest pet peeves these days in businesses. You have to watch what you say so much. And why not just accept people and say, he's from a different culture. I understand. My partner's Italian. Okay, I was telling you that. And you hear things about how people back in the old country, because her parents grew up in Italy, and how they react differently because of what they learned. My mother's family comes from old Yugoslavia. My grandfather came over to Canada when Yugoslavia was still a communist country and before it was broken up into Serbia and Croatia and, all of that. And
Slovenia.
yeah, and you got to understand the culture is so much a part of what people feel and how they react in WordPress or other things.
Mhm.
And that's what most people don't get is culture is a big part of the solution.
Absolutely. I mean, we all bring our lived experiences into every situation, and we filter everything through that lens. And it can be really challenging as leaders, as individual contributors, as company leaders to un unfilter,
Yeah.
right? Or to put on somebody else's filter, right? And
Yeah.
try to jump into their shoes and see things through the lens that they've got. The more we can do that, the better we'll get. Um, we have to be willing to accept that our lived experience is not the only experience out there.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it's another one of our
And we
principles in the open team framework. It's inclusive
and,
culture.
and we have to accept that. And I kind of said to you beforehand, I've got friends from all kinds of culture, all kinds of races. I'm lucky that way. And you have to accept why their viewpoints are where they are, because a lot of cultural viewpoints is, where have you come from? What happened in your past? What happened in your family past? Why did this happen? And that's such a big impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, what a segue. What else are you working on up at Team WP?
Well, Team WP, so that, I mean, you've heard a little bit of the passion and the enthusiasm for leadership, for team, for culture. So practically, what does that look like? Um, Over the last couple of months, I've been running something called the Team Experience Index, which is like super simply, it's an employee engagement survey. The whole
Mm.
idea is to create a tool that any team, any employee from any team can participate in and contribute to this global view of what it's like to work in WordPress. We don't have that, right? There are no companies that are targeting WordPress or the WordPress ecosystem specifically for any kind of data on the employee experience. And we need it. We're big enough now. It's time for us to start having that data set.
Yeah.
And so that's where the Team Experience Index came out of. I've got a version of it that I call Culture Compass, which is like a tailored version. So if you're a company that doesn't want to do the full Team Experience Index, but you want to do your own version with maybe your own questions or just pick and choose some, you can do that. What's really great though now, we've actually got the Team Experience Index data as a benchmark. So I'm working with one I'm working with one plugin company right now where they've just completed it. They actually got 100% of their team to fill this in, which is so crazy. We
That's
can
awesome.
actually benchmark and see how their team's results compare to the general WordPress ecosystem. And it's fantastic because it gives new insights to a team, and a better understanding maybe of where they should be focusing effort and energy. So we've got that. The other really cool thing that I'm trying to get off the ground is this idea of certification. We don't have any kind of certification in the WordPress ecosystem that would let a candidate who's looking for a job, or somebody who's looking for a job in WordPress, to know whether companies are good culture places to go, or invested in team,
Yeah.
and so if we can actually create a certification process that enables that, then I think that would be really great for the ecosystem as a whole, for HR recruiters that are in these companies trying to find the best talent. If you have to pick between company A and company B, the salary is the same, the work is the same, but the difference is that one team has an emphasis and a focus on team and culture, and one doesn't. Like, that's going to be the deciding factor. And in fact, you could probably end up with a lower pay, same role, but because of that team and culture thing, not that I'm advocating that, by the way, but reality is that's often what wins for people, is that team and culture lift. So yeah,
So
open team certification is what it's called, and trying to invite teams to be willing to participate in it, especially, and just really start this conversation around leadership and the language of leadership and how we do it. I got lots of ideas of different ways to support teams. You can bring me in if you want as a fractional team and people guy. Happy to do that. Yeah,
yeah.
that's sort of the whole Team WP landscape right now.
The certification is such a cool one. There's a couple other initiatives in this space going on. There's the folks over at WP Connects, which works
Yeah,
with the military,
yeah,
Talisha and her group. I know there's been discussion with people like Courtney Robertson are involved in some of that certification stuff behind the scenes.
yeah,
I think the community has kind of deemed we need it now or yesterday, and
yeah,
it has to be done the right way. And the reason I say that is I think back to my days of writing Microsoft certs.
yeah,
And I think back to the days of we had a guy in house when I worked at Women's College Hospital, and he was a Novell. So there's a name from the past, certified network engineer. And my colleague and my colleague Dave, who I consider smarter than me, and I don't consider myself a dummy by any means, trained this guy who was a Novell CNE how to do his job. I
wow,
actually wrote my Novell exam on training this guy, believe it or not. So the point I'm trying to make is we got to make sure these certifications are practical, not just paper certs. We all know the joke about the lawyer who writes the bar exam. He knows more the day he writes the bar exam and then forgets 90% of it 5 minutes later, right? And we got to make sure our certifications mean something, not just to write the exam, not just for a resume, but long term. And
that's
that's
right.
always my concern with the whole certification stuff. And that's coming from the guy who's got two diplomas. I don't have a degree, but I have 15 certifications after my name if I choose to put them there. And I'm saying that. So,
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like, we can certify individuals,
yeah,
but there are organizations out there that certify companies, and that's
yes,
where that's the space I'm looking at, is how do you help a company sh- take that pivot, right, or that 1 degree shift to add some emphasis onto their team and culture, and make choices and decisions that actually impact people for better. Here's the really cool thing, because in WordPress it's all connected, right?
yeah,
Even
yeah,
though we all work in individual teams with individual, revenue lines and all of that kind of stuff, we're all connected by the fact that we're building in and around this WordPress platform.
yes,
And so we get together and we talk and we hang out, right? We call that community.
Mhm.
And when we develop these practices around how to talk to each other, how to be a better team, how to be better leaders, how to coordinate, how to build and collaborate better, when we are doing that in our little sort of isolated teams, and then we come together for the WordPress project, those practices, those best practices, those ways of working, those healthy systems become the default for how we
Yeah.
interact with each other in the community.
Yeah.
Imagine what that does to a release cycle when the whole release team is implementing these things from a place of shared language or shared understanding or shared knowledge. Oh man,
Oh,
like I just I can't imagine how different the tone would be in our interactions on Twitter if rather than jumping on somebody for something they've said, right? Without any context or understanding and with only
mhm.
240 characters to work from. We said, "Hey, I hear what you're saying. I don't understand where you're coming from. Help me understand it so that I can support or whatever, right? Or provide a
Yeah.
comment on this." I mean,
Yeah.
it just changes the way we talk to each other. Ah, I'd love to see that.
Communication is one of the biggest problems out there, whether it's the WordPress ecosystem or any others. People haven't learned how to actively listen to people. That's a big
Mm,
one. Because you can't, excuse me, you can't communicate if you don't listen. And I was having a discussion one day with Anne McCarthy, and I don't know. Anne's like one of the project leaders up at Automatic. She's been involved in the release team for a number of years, and I know Anne's not on Twitter, and I kind of understand why
yeah,
sometimes with
absolutely.
all the crap that goes on. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you, I will say this every time. Anne is one of the most approachable people up at Automatic. If you want to know something, if you want to know what's going on with the release, all you got to do is reach out on Slack, and Anne's got all the time in the world to listen. But the problem is she's chosen, I think, and I could be wrong, so I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she's chosen to stay away from Twitter. And I think some of it's just the bandwidth. And sometimes instead of trying to be constructive, it turns into be a complaint session all day. And that doesn't get the community anywhere. That doesn't get you anywhere, me anywhere, anybody else anywhere.
We're all passionate in
Yeah.
WordPress.
Yeah.
We're, and consider, like we have to consider both sides. I get it, right? The release leads have things that they've got to accomplish. They've got all these differing perspectives and views that they have to balance and manage, and then they have to think about what's best for the project and what the sort of laid out direction is of where they want to go. But you've also got to consider the perspective of all of those business owners who are trying to earn a living, not just for themselves, but for other people. They feel the pressure of
Yeah.
delivering for those people, right?
Yeah.
And making sure that, payroll's going to get met next week and we've got runway for more than a month, right? Like all of
Mm.
those pressures that business owners live under that reduces their ability to slow down, reduces their ability to stop a little bit, right? Because if they've got very serious things to meet, and that can often drive the emotion. I used to have this when I worked at Envato all the time. Like we've got to recognize that while as an organization at Envato, we're able to go slower, we're able to take our time because we know we've got a paycheck coming at the end of the next couple of weeks. We know we've got revenue coming in and we've got that runway mapped out. But for all of the business owners that are using the platform, they don't have that visibility. They don't have that same degree of certainty. And every decision we make impacts them differently and it lands differently.
Yeah. So
And
true.
it's one of the reasons why I have so much compassion and empathy for Josefa and Matt Mullenweg and senior leaders in WordPress is after my experience at Envato, I get it, right? I get
Yeah.
the balance, the tension,
Mhm.
right? You have to just live with it, be okay with it.
I do too. So I want to jump into something else. You just had the pleasure of speaking at WordCamp Buffalo,
I
I
did.
guess, a couple of weeks ago, and congratulations for doing that. It's a big step for anybody stepping into that speaking realm. It takes a lot of work. most of us know I always joke that an hour talk, I did one in February, that an hour talk at PodCamp Toronto, and that took me like hours to prepare. By the time I'd gone over the slides and done all the work and put all the research in and did what I wanted. How was the experience? And would you do it again?
Oh, I will be my own worst critic because I will talk about how I read more than I looked at people, how I was too long in some of my sections, right? All those kinds of little things that I will nitpick.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so nice to talk to a live audience. I would, like the week before, I did a presentation for the Web Agency Summit, which is virtual. You're
Yep.
literally looking into a camera. You don't have any audience feedback. There's no little chat screen that's like on TikTok where you can have that live sort of connection to people. Nothing, right? So it is just you and your jokes, and whether they land or not, you don't know because it's all dead. So like the switch to being in Buffalo and to being able to look people in the eye and watch people nod was kind of cool. Like it was good.
Yeah.
One person after came up and told me that they had like it was so meaty for them as far as the content that they live tweeted the whole thing and were like randomly quoting it. I was like, oh, that's great. Because I completely forgot that I had wanted to have all my own live tweets pre-scheduled and like little quotes. Like you talk about the work that you put into these things. Rich Tabor is my idol when it comes to a WordCamp talk because he just nails it every time. But the amount of effort it takes and to do all that plus all the other things, it's intense. But I enjoyed it. I love the conversations. I got to meet some folks down there, great people. I met the folks from PMP, Jason Coleman and Chris Badgett. So that was cool from Lifter LMS. Lovely folks. I met Caesar from the project management team at Automatic, who's based in London, Ontario. So that was kind of cool, a little Canadian connection. And then Malcolm Peralty from Kingston was there as well. So he was great. He just was like, so excited. His wife came down and the talk, she loved it because she's doing a lot of culture and teamwork in her role, which is outside of the WordPress ecosystem. So no, it's like all these things. It's fun. And it was my first time. It was my first time speaking at a WordCamp. I don't know if people realize that even though I've been in this ecosystem and worked for these major companies, when I was working at Envato's banned from participating in WordPress events because of their stance on the GPL, which is totally fine. But it meant when I went there, I couldn't present, couldn't speak. And then the pandemic hit and there were no events. So I couldn't go to anything, right? And do anything. And then last year I chose, I was between roles when the call for speakers sort of ended, so I didn't get any pitches in. And then this year, funnily enough, I pitched for WordCamp Europe and I pitched for WordCamp Buffalo, and WordCamp Europe was the first WordCamp that I was ever approved to speak at. So I got that and was like having my own personal heart attack, which they don't tell you. The secret is they tell you can't tell anyone. Can you imagine being told that you're speaking at WordCamp Europe and then not being able to tell anyone? It was like, oh, it was hard.
Because you want to tell everybody, and
you want to tell everyone. Yeah, it's huge. And then,
proud.
And then like literally a few days later, I got the approval for WordCamp Buffalo, which happened earlier. So I don't know. I'm excited. It was great. It's a good way to sort of break the ice of speaking at WordCamps was to do WordCamp Buffalo. And now I'm ready. I hope, fingers crossed, for WordCamp Europe.
Yeah, congratulations. Well done. And Malcolm was sitting in the front row, wasn't he? And he
was, yeah.
And he was tweeting about it, and he seemed to really enjoy your talks. So what I'll tell you is I'm like that. When I speak, I find I am hard on myself. As somebody, I can remember for the first time in my life, my partner decided to go to my talk at PodCamp. And she said, your talk was amazing. I said, yeah, but I can find 10 things that shouldn't have happened. And she's like, I didn't say those 10 things. And I said, yeah, you were given the talk.
Yeah, exactly.
And we all roll that way. And it's just like, So you gotta kind of, I think we're our own worst critics, honestly. And what I would do is anybody who wants to do a talk, like get out there, get to a smaller WordCamp, get to a flagship WordCamp, because I really think we need some new blood with some of these speakers. We don't need the same old speaker every year, all year. Yeah, there's some big players in this space. I get it. But we need new blood in some of these talks, and that helps our community grow. So
I'm excited. It's weird to consider to think of myself as new blood, considering how long I've been in the ecosystem. But I guess for the circuit, if you will, it's new blood.
I haven't done. It's interesting because I've been in the WordCamp space. I think I've done more WordCamp talk. Most of my talks have been either at PodCamp or industry marketing conventions or stuff like that. It's really interesting. So even though I'm known in the space, I haven't done that many talks. And frankly, the flagship WordCamps don't seem to align with my vacation schedule anymore. So it's that old work-life balance problem, right? So
Work-life balance. That's it. Yeah.
James, this has been an absolute awesome chat this morning. Thank you. And if somebody wants to get a hold of you to talk about Total WP, speaking, or anything else, where's the best place to find you?
You can hang out teamwp.co or find me on Twitter. It's just at James Giroux. That's my handle pretty well everywhere. And I am very open to conversations.
Yeah. Thanks, James. Have a wonderful and amazing day, my friend. Be well.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by Stunning Digital Marketing, the digital marketing agency for all your business needs. We are also your WordPress security experts, having over 14 years of experience locking down, backing up, and protecting WordPress websites. Go to stunningdigitalmarketing.com for more info, or stunningdigitalmarketing.info for links to everywhere we can be found on the web. A very special thank you to James for joining me on this edition of the SDM Show. This podcast is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I miss you very much. I love you, and I think about you every day. For more information about Stunning Digital Marketing, your digital marketing experts, go to stunningdigitalmarketing.com or go to stunningdigitalmarketing.info to find out all the great places that Rob Cairns can be found on the web.